Rod Arquette Show on Talk Radio 105.9 KNRS.
Well, ever since its latest crisis developed with Iran as a result of the U.S. taking out a senior military authority there in Iran, there have been stories about Iranians being detained at the border. They've tried to come into the country. Either Iranians who are now American citizens or Iranians who are just trying to visit the country. There have been problems at the border, conflicting reports, as a matter of fact, about that. Well, let's dig into it a little bit more. My next guest is Pallavi Ahluwalia. She spoke with us on our Newsmaker line earlier today about what's going on with the border, and I asked Pallavi, first of all, these reports, we're getting conflicting reports about how Iranians are being treated at the U.S. border. What has she heard?
So there is news that U.S. Customs and Border Protection is doing enhanced security at the ports of entry. And even though the agency says that there is no directive from the headquarters, it is actually happening. We're seeing it in the news that there are several Irani origin U.S. citizens who are being held or have been detained for over 4 to 5 hours. They've been isolated and questioned. And so, yes, that is going on right now at the borders.
And is it legal to do this enhanced security? I mean, is there any law? Are there any laws being broken, Pallavi?
So you can do enhanced security. The CBP is tasked with keeping the country safe. So checking into people that are coming into the country is important. But if anyone is being targeted because of national origin, then we do have issues constitutionally. And I think that's where the concern comes in, is even if they're just Iranian people with visas that are coming into the country, that's a different matter, as opposed to U.S. citizens that are of national origin, which are who are Persian, then that would be troubling, and we can literally go back in history and then find some parallels which may be disturbing.
Mm-hmm. You're an expert in this area. Do you consider this a form of harassment that is taking place?
So what I would say here would be that CBP is tasked with keeping the border, people coming in at the borders, to allow them entry or not. They're tasked with keeping U.S. safe. So full credit to the officers that work there. But I do think that once in a while, they're looking at questions or asking questions which will never board the correct answer. Would you ask someone, you're a terrorist, and you think that you're going to get an answer that says yes? Who's going to say that to us? So you have to be a little bit more mindful about what kind of devices you deploy to get people to fess up or own up to the fact that they're coming here to disturb something about inside the U.S. You definitely don't want to challenge or attack people who just left for a vacation a few days back with their family and now coming in and suddenly are not welcome into the country. And you show that by not adhering to the normal questions that you would ask them. I'm reading that some of them had some, they had the global entry or something that just gives them expedited entry into the country. Those provisions or those entitlements were disregarded, and they were put through the regular set of questions. Now, I do see one Iranian family that was asked questions about military, and maybe that was not so bad, because if the husband had some military service in Iran earlier, asking those questions should have been okay, and that should not be so provocative. However, I would say that everyone has to use a little bit of reasonableness in those kind of questions when there are little kids around or anything like that. You're not wanting to tell the little kids that those U.S. citizens are any different from any others.
Mm-hmm. Pallavi, could this just be a very isolated incident like the one that happened in Washington State? Maybe some Border Patrol or people who are in charge of this may be a little overzealous, because are you aware of any directive coming out of the administration to do something like this?
I don't think that there would be a directive. I think it would be the CBP who's taking this on. And even if it is, they're completely not owning up to it being a directive. Again, I'm not sure if it's isolated, because it was not just one family that was put through that, but several of them. So I do think that this is more than just that.
Mm-hmm. Is there a better way to address this?
Uh, I would say that the better way to address this would be to understand a little bit more about the people that were. So everyone has records of who became U.S. citizens at what point and all of that. Now, to just say that all Iranians are now going to be subject to some kind of heightened scrutiny would be unfair to everyone that's lived in the country peacefully. And of course, I think FBI and all the agencies that are tasked with keeping us safe would have more information on that. But I wouldn't say that the CBP would be able to catch someone unless someone is really walking with any explosives or anything like that, which they have to be checked. And of course, I mean, that search would be a different kind of a criteria. But I think you're not going to get anyone to answer questions directly when you ask them 3 or 4, 5 questions, or even if you hold them for 5 hours, that we're going to just say that they were coming here to do something at the direction of Iran.
Who has been affected by this, Pallavi? Are these people who have lived in the country, have left the country, and are trying to come back into the country to return to their homes, or are these people from Iran who are trying to get into the country for the first time? Who's being affected?
So that's the distinction here. If it was to be people who just have visas to visit the U.S., they going through this extra scrutiny would be different from U.S. citizens going through that scrutiny who were naturalized and perhaps had origins in Iran early on. Right, so there's a difference between how a U.S. citizen has to be treated and how maybe another potential immigrant has to be treated. So I think that's where the objection is coming from, is not the fact that you can't ask questions or tough questions, but would you give some regard to the fact that someone's a U.S. citizen? And of course, other agencies have to be deployed to find if they could be someone who could disturb the U.S. in any way.
Where does this play out? How is this going to play out, do you think?
I think it's going to calm down after all these news reports are coming down, and I think CBP is going to be a little bit more careful. I believe that there was, I saw an article on NPR that said that there was a U.S. citizen but of Iranian origin journalist who came in, and once he's a historian too, and when he was coming in at JFK, he was asked a bunch of questions, and this is over the weekend, and he's also the director of the Middle East Center in at UPenn. So I think what he told the officers was, is this seeming to be a little politically motivated? And I think they kind of dropped that line of questioning pretty quickly. So I think if it's political, then it's not fair to people who are coming back to their own country, which is the United States at this point. But if it is coming from a concern that is triggered by some information that they have about the people who are entering the country, then that's a separate matter.
On our Newsmaker line, she is an immigration attorney, Pallavi Ahluwalia, talking to us about Iranians being detained at the U.S. border.